Greetings and welcome. Tonight, we will embark on a journey into the quiet, intellectual shadows of the past. Our destination is not a grand battlefield or a royal court, but the hushed, unassuming rooms where ideas were born in secrecy. We will set our minds to drift into the heart of 18th century Germany, to an organization whose name has become a whispered word in modern myth, the Illuminati. This video will not deal with the fantastical tales of modern legend. Instead, we will separate fact from fiction, exploring the quiet historical reality of the Bavarian Illuminati, a real-life secret society that existed for only a brief period of time. We will uncover the daily routines of its members, the intellectual ideas they shared, and the quiet purpose that drove them. So, find a comfortable position, let the sounds around you fade, and allow your mind to be carried back to a world of secret meetings and whispered ambitions. What it was really like to be a Bavarian Illuminati member. Imagine yourself in a quiet German town in the late 1770s. The air is cool and a soft rain is falling on the cobblestone streets. It is late, well past the hour when most respectable citizens are in their beds. You are walking slowly and deliberately, your steps muffled by the quiet of the night. Your destination is not a public inn or a friend's home, but a specific, unassuming room in a private residence. It is a place of secrecy, a sanctuary where a different kind of work is done. You are on your way to a meeting of the Bavarian Illuminati. The daily life of an Illuminati member was not one of global conspiracies or grand theatrical rituals. It was, for the most part, a quiet, intellectual existence lived in the shadows. Most members were highly educated, men of the Enlightenment, drawn from the ranks of scholars, lawyers, and civil servants. They were men who held to the belief that the world could be made a better place, not through revolution, but through the quiet, methodical improvement of the self. Your evening meeting would begin with a quiet, careful knock on a specific door. Once inside, you would be greeted by a fellow member and led to a simple, unadorned room. The air would be still, and the only light would be from a few gently flickering candles. This was not the opulent setting of a grand conspiracy, but a place of deliberate simplicity, designed to focus the mind. The conversation would begin in hushed tones, the low murmur of voices a backdrop to the more important work of the evening. The core of your daily life as a member was the work you did between these meetings. The Illuminati was a society of intellectual and moral self-improvement. You would be given a series of books to read and papers to write. These were not mystical texts, but rather philosophical and moral works. You were required to keep a notebook on your progress, a detailed diary of your thoughts and feelings, and you were to present these writings at the meetings. This was your true work, a quiet and rigorous process of self-examination and intellectual refinement. The goal was to become a better, more moral, and more enlightened version of yourself. The meetings themselves were governed by a strict but simple hierarchy. The society was structured like a pyramid, with different ranks that members could ascend through. As you progressed, you were given access to more information and more responsibilities. The ranks were named with classical and ancient titles, and each had its own set of symbolic rituals. These were not dramatic theatrical ceremonies, but rather quiet, symbolic acts meant to impress upon you the importance of your work. The rituals were simple, almost meditative in their execution, and they were designed to serve as a constant reminder of the society's goals. The life of an Illuminati member was also a life of compartmentalization. The society was founded on a strict principle of secrecy. You were only to know a handful of other members, and you knew them only by their code names. You were to speak of the society to no one outside of it. This secrecy was not about plotting a grand scheme to rule the world, but about protecting the society from political and religious opposition. In 18th century Germany, the ideas of the Enlightenment, especially those that questioned the authority of the church and the state, were considered dangerous. The secrecy was a matter of self-preservation, a quiet, necessary act to ensure the continued existence of their work. So your life was a duality. By day, you were a normal citizen, a scholar or a government worker. By night, you were an Illuminatus, a member of a secret society, quietly working to improve yourself and, by extension, the world. It was a life of measured intellectual work, of quiet rituals, and of constant secrecy. It was not the life of a spy or a conspirator, but the life of a philosophical idealist, living in a world that was not yet ready for his ideas. The secret world of the Bavarian Illuminati was the product of a singular mind, a quiet professor who lived a life of both deep intellectual pursuit and profound frustration. To truly understand the society, we must now turn our attention to the man who brought it into being, Adam Weishaupt. Let the low murmur of the meetings fade, and let the flickering candlelight illuminate the life of a man whose name has been whispered in secrecy for centuries. Adam Weishaupt was born in Ingolstadt, Bavaria, in 1748, during a time of great intellectual and social change. From a young age, he was an earnest and brilliant student, immersed in the world of academic rigor. He was educated by Jesuits, a powerful and influential religious order that dominated the universities of the time. This education gave him a deep understanding of philosophy, religion, and the inner workings of authority. Yet, it also created in him a quiet, simmering resentment. He came to believe that the Jesuits were stifling free thought and intellectual progress. He saw their influence as a chain on the minds of men, and he yearned for a way to break it. By his mid-20s, Weishaupt had become a professor of canon law at the University of Ingolstadt. He was a respected academic, a man of quiet ambition and deep conviction. But his frustration with the state of intellectual life in Bavaria was a constant presence. He felt that the great ideas of the Enlightenment, ideas of reason, liberty, and the rights of man, were not being openly discussed and debated in a meaningful way. He saw a world where intellectual progress was being held back by dogmatic tradition and unthinking piety. He desired a space where men could speak freely, without fear of reprisal, and work toward the betterment of humanity. In 1776, at the age of 28, Weishaupt took a quiet and decisive step. In a room in his home, with only a handful of students, he founded a society that he initially called the Order of Perfectibilists. The name itself speaks to his motivations. He believed that through a quiet, structured process of self-improvement, men could achieve moral perfection. His goal was not to overthrow governments or to seize power. His goal was to create a society of virtuous men who could, through their own moral example and their gradual influence on others, bring about a more just and rational world. The society was founded as a quiet alternative to the Freemasons, a place for serious, philosophical discussion that he felt the Masons lacked. The society grew slowly at first, but soon began to attract other like-minded academics and intellectuals. Weishaupt, from his quiet study in Ingolstadt, orchestrated this growth with methodical precision. He established a system of ranks, rituals, and clandestine meetings that we discussed in the last segment. He saw the secrecy not as a tool for conspiracy, but as a necessary shield to protect his members and their controversial ideas from the hostile forces of the state and the church. His hope was that his perfectibilists would, through their quiet and careful influence, rise to positions of power and subtly guide the world toward a more enlightened future. But the society's rapid growth would prove to be its undoing. As it expanded, its secrecy became harder to maintain. In the early 1780s, internal conflicts and disputes led to a series of betrayals. Former members, unhappy with Weishaupt's leadership, went to the authorities. They revealed the existence of the society and its secret hierarchical structure. The Bavarian elector, a man who feared all forms of social and political upheaval, acted quickly. He issued an edict in 1785 that officially banned the society, along with all other secret societies. Weishaupt was forced to flee Bavaria, his academic career ruined, and his dreams of a perfectible world shattered. The society that he had founded in quiet ambition was now officially dead. Adam Weishaupt lived out the rest of his long life in exile, a respected academic, but a man stripped of his influence. The Illuminati that he created was a short-lived intellectual experiment, a footnote in the history of the Enlightenment. Yet, a man who had sought to quietly reform the world through reason would ironically become the central figure of a myth that cast him as a shadowy, all-powerful master of the world. It is a quiet testament to how history can take an ordinary man and, in the hands of time and myth, transform him into an enduring legend. Adam Weishaupt, the man who had so carefully constructed a society of reason and enlightenment, had been driven from his home and his life's work had been declared illegal. But his exile was not the end of the story. It was, in fact, the beginning of the great and enduring mystery that would come to define the Illuminati. The society, in its historical form, was dead. Yet the myth of its survival was just being born. Let us now turn our attention to this quiet historical paradox. We'll leave the quiet, exiled life of Weishaupt behind and focus on the very public events that led to the society's official demise. The Elector of Bavaria, Karl Theodor, was a man of the old order, deeply suspicious of new, radical ideas. He feared the influence of secret societies like the Illuminati and the Freemasons. In his mind, these clandestine groups represented a direct threat to the authority of the church and the state. The quiet murmur of intellectual dissent that took place in private homes was, to him, a dangerous precursor to public rebellion. In 1785, the Elector issued a series of edicts that officially banned all secret societies. This act was swift and decisive. Following the edicts, police and government officials began to conduct raids on the homes of prominent Illuminati members. This was not a dramatic, theatrical manhunt, but a series of quiet, methodical searches. The officers seized documents, membership lists, and the private correspondences of the society. It was a simple, bureaucratic end to a philosophical experiment. The society, unable to survive in a hostile political climate, simply ceased to exist. But the government's quiet victory would, in a strange twist of history, become the fuel for a global conspiracy myth. The Bavarian government, in its attempt to justify the crackdown, published many of the documents they had seized from the Illuminati members. They wanted to expose the society's radical ideas to the public and prove that it was a dangerous, subversive organization. However, the very documents that were meant to debunk the society instead became the primary source material for its future legend. The government's exposé was filled with references to the society's hierarchical structure, its code names, and its secret rituals, all of which would, in the hands of future myth-makers, be interpreted as evidence of a vast, world-controlling conspiracy. The myth of the Illuminati's survival would truly begin to take root a few years later, in the wake of the French Revolution. The bloody, chaotic violence of the revolution sent a shock wave of fear and paranoia across Europe. Many conservative thinkers, French émigrés, and other opponents of the revolution began to search for a hidden secret cause behind the cataclysm. They found it in the Illuminati. They began to claim that the revolution was not a popular uprising, but a carefully orchestrated plot by a secret society. The Illuminati, they claimed, had not been destroyed by the Bavarian Elector, but had simply gone underground, plotting in secret for decades to unleash a new era of chaos and godlessness. These ideas were popularized in a series of books written by men like Abbe Baruel and John Robison. They took the historical facts of the Illuminati's existence, blended them with rumor and speculation, and created a narrative of an all-powerful, insidious organization. They presented a world where everything was connected, where every major event was the result of a secret plan. The books were widely read, and their ideas resonated with a population that was terrified and uncertain. In a time of great upheaval, it was, in a strange way, comforting to believe that there was a hidden hand behind the chaos, rather than to accept that society itself was capable of such a violent and unpredictable change. And so, the quiet, historical mystery of the Illuminati's final days is not about whether they survived, for the evidence is quite clear that they did not. The true mystery is this: why did the myth of their survival become so compelling? Why did a failed, short-lived intellectual society become a legend that has endured for centuries? The answer lies not in their power, but in our own quiet human need to find a hidden pattern in a chaotic world. The mystery of the Illuminati is not in their secrets, but in the enduring power of our own imagination to see a secret where none exists. We have spent our time in the quiet, intellectual shadows of a short-lived secret society. We have explored the anxieties and the clandestine ambitions that drove its members. But the very ideas that fueled the Illuminati were born in a different and far more public world. Let us now emerge from the darkness and into the warm light of the Enlightenment, a world of open debate, social gatherings, and a belief that ideas, once spoken, could change the world without needing to hide in the shadows. Imagine yourself in the heart of an 18th century European city, perhaps Paris or London. The air is crisp, and the streets are alive with the sounds of carriages and the chatter of a bustling population. You are an Enlightenment philosopher, a man of ideas, and your day is a rhythm of intellectual engagement. Your morning begins not with a secret meeting, but with a trip to the local coffee house, an institution that was the very heartbeat of your world. The coffee house was the antithesis of the Illuminati's secret lodge. Here the doors were open to almost anyone. The air would be thick with the rich scent of freshly brewed coffee, and the low, constant murmur of conversation would fill the room. You would sit at a small table, reading the latest pamphlets and newspapers, and you would engage in conversation with anyone who wished to join you. This was your work. You would debate politics, discuss the latest scientific discoveries, and critique the works of other philosophers. The rules of this place were not about secrecy and hierarchy, but about a free and open exchange of ideas. Your goal was to convince others not through a secret ritual, but through the power of your arguments. Your work was a form of intellectual labor, but it was not done with a pickaxe or a shovel. It was done with a quill pen and a well-reasoned argument. The paper that you wrote would not be a secret treatise, but a publicly published essay or a book. These works were your tools, and they were meant to be read, debated, and critiqued by the wider world. The goal was to spread knowledge, to inform the public, and to change society from the outside in. The life of an Enlightenment philosopher was a life of public discourse, a life that valued the open airing of ideas above all else. The afternoon might find you in a salon, a different kind of intellectual gathering hosted by a wealthy patron, often a woman. The atmosphere here would be more refined than a coffee house. The room would be filled with the quiet rustle of silk gowns and the sound of soft, polite conversation. Here, you would present your ideas to a group of influential thinkers, artists, and aristocrats. The salon was a place where ideas could be socialized, where a philosophical concept could be discussed with a poet, a scientist, and a duke, all at the same table. It was a space that allowed for the cross-pollination of thought, a direct contrast to the compartmentalized and secretive world of the Illuminati. The challenges you faced were not of secrecy and betrayal, but of censorship and public opinion. Your words could be powerful, but they could also be seen as dangerous. Your books could be banned, and your ideas could be attacked. But this was a part of the process, a necessary part of the public exchange of ideas. You believed that a free and open society could only be built on the foundation of reason and public debate, and that the best ideas would, in the end, win out. So, the life of an Enlightenment philosopher was one of immense intellectual and social engagement. It was a life lived in the public eye, a life of endless debate, of writing, and of a profound belief in the power of the printed word. It was a world away from the quiet, paranoid world of the Illuminati. While the secret society sought to change the world from within, the Enlightenment philosophers sought to change it from without, through the power of open ideas. They were two sides of the same era, both driven by a desire for a more rational world, but they chose completely different paths to get there. And so, our journey through the quiet, intellectual shadows of the 18th century comes to a close. We have peered into the hushed rooms of a short-lived secret society and walked through the public, bustling halls of Enlightenment philosophy. We have seen how a few men, driven by a quiet ambition to improve the world, chose secrecy as their path, and how that choice, in a strange twist of history, gave rise to a powerful and enduring myth. Let the images of the secret lodge and the bustling coffee house now fade. Let the quiet whispers of the Illuminati and the public debates of the philosophers become distant echoes. We have explored the history of a society that was both a product of its time and a fascinating precursor to our own quiet human fascination with hidden truths and secret powers. Drift away from the historical journey and settle back into the quiet comfort of your own time and your own space. The work is done. The stories have been told. All that remains is a peaceful, welcoming silence. Good night.